we go through 3 steps when we encounter a brand. And the first one is sort of like, do I recognize myself in this brand? Is it for people like me or for companies like me? Often I find one of the problems is you tell everything about your offer. What I want to know is why should I choose you over your competition? Dare to niche down, dare to specialize, dare to stand out. You'd rather have a few people that really are crazy about you than the whole crowd of people that don't really care. Companies know their customers a lot better than they think. There is an interesting story there. They just don't know how to tell it.
This is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast, where we are here to educate, equip, and inspire people to build extraordinary companies. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can get updates every time we drop a new episode. Now let's get it started. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins. I'm going to be your host today. And in our studio, we have John Elbing. How are you today, sir?
Hi, Rick. Happy to be here. Great way to end the week.
Yes. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm humbled by that. Thank you so much. Folks, if you haven't done it already, we would be delighted if you would like to subscribe and hit the bell so you can get updates on every episode that we drop. And without further ado, let's get to it. So John, as we ask all of our guests, and our audience is just sitting on the edges of their seat waiting to find out, who are you, what do you do, and why do you do what you do?
Okay, so I coach companies and startups, and I specialized in storytelling. And I found that storytelling, it started out as trying to help people get a better marketing message, and it's turned out to be a more powerful tool than that, where it helps teams align teams on the same story, even clarify your positioning, be more focused on the customer. So what I do is I help them write their customer story. Mm-hmm. And it's how they fit in their customer story. And that flips the script and helps them see themselves from the outside. You know, everyone is so concentrated on what they do, what they offer, what they, from the inside out. So what I help them do is step back and look at themselves from the outside and tell their customer story.
You're going to have to dig into that. But what I need to know, though, what got you into this space? I mean, this isn't something that, we step out of college and it's like, hey, I'm going to be a storyteller, unless you're a communications major. And then it's more like, we'd like to do that, but, nobody's going to pay us to do that because we have no experience. So what got you into this field?
I mean, I've zigged and zagged. So I was a software engineer.
Uh-huh.
And, went into kind of things like project management. I went back to do an MBA in finance, and I thought, ooh, finance, never again. But it's a great, background knowledge. I did some startups that didn't work out, and then I worked in marketing agencies. So I have this combination of tech, finance, marketing, entrepreneurial experience. And I got into a lot of different methods, design thinking, and I have canvases where you use Post-its to figure out things. And I've worked with all these companies, and then, I just keep reading, keep learning different things. And when I stumbled on storytelling, that's when I sort of started playing with it, and I found how powerful it could be, because it really forces people to ask the right questions. Who am I talking to? What's important? What's less important? And things like that. So I really can't say that I was, meant for this. It was, it's sort of this combination of all these things. And I think one step was stand-up. Was improv. So I did like 8 years of improv, and went on stage, and you sort of learn to tell stories, but to let go and to not feel the ridicule or anything like that. And somehow that story side sort of stayed with me. And so the last step, I guess, is that I realized that storytelling is this buzzword. Everyone's talking about storytelling. And a lot of it is how to tell your story in a better way. We start with a hook and do this and dance on one foot or whatever it is, but not much about what story to tell. So I created this method called Storybuilding. It's a book. The method is about building the right story. Then with that story, you can create a website or a pitch or go up on stage or whatever it is, talk to your customers. But it's more about getting the right story than just the sort of tips and tricks on how to tell it well.
I like that. Give us an example of where you took a company that didn't quite have a story, a decent sized company, and whatever that means to you. I'd love to hear about what that transformation looked like, because what I heard you say earlier was that, it's not just the marketing story anymore, but it's a story that, does a bit of a transformation within the organization. Gets everybody aligned and on the same page and that sort of thing.
So one that comes to mind is Felco, which is the world leader of garden shears, of all things. They're 80-year-old company, even farm workers in California buy them, even though they're crazy expensive because they last forever. It's a really heavy duty garden shears, but also, kind of tools like that. And then a few years back, they created their first e-commerce website, and they realized that there were, gentleman gardener kind of types, your little yard, that love their brand and their tools. They wanted the best tools. People had actually tattooed Felco on their body like Harley Davidson.
Wow. Okay.
And so they started they created a few with the leather handles and golden blades and with a designer and stuff like that. But somehow their story was, hey, Swiss quality and that's about it. Mm-hmm. And so you went on their website and there was this mix of heavy duty tools and sort of designer tools all together with no story. Mm-hmm. And so we not only had to build a story, but we had to build two stories for the two different audiences, because somehow the benefit was sort of the same for both. So we created two different personas and sort of to say, we understand you. These are your aspirations, your challenges. This is what we offer. And this is how your life will be better, but in two different worlds. And then their resellers have different stories to tell. And, it sort of there was sort of this click internally to say, hey, we have these two very different audiences and products and styles. And that changed how, their whole, then they hired this $1 million marketing firm to actually implement that change. But that was quite a big step after 80 years.
Yeah. You said 80 years, not 8 years, right?
Yeah, 80 years.
Because 8 years, I mean,
it's sort of like it's the grandson or the great grandson that took over the company, third generation kind of thing. Uh-huh. But somehow it's almost even more obvious with startups. I have some of these very deep tech startups. So they have this amazing tech. And then they say, ooh, well, I guess we have to sell it now. Who should we sell it to? And so to go through that, to see what they're offering from, companies will say, we have this great solution. Well, the problem must be exactly what matches our solution. Almost the problem is they don't have our solution yet, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And when you step back and you understand the client, it's not necessarily the practical solution. It's about feeling seen. It's about security. It's about being the hero. It's about, solving more other problems and things. And if you can get that right, I worked with NGO in water purification. Mm-hmm. And normally in developing countries, they'll have a program and they'll deliver chlorine in powder form by truck, put it in the water, and that, cleans out the bacteria and cleans the water. And they have a system where with electrolyze, they can create chlorine locally instead of shipping it. And I asked them, what is the problem you solve? And they say, well, people get sick, kind of thing. But then we step back and the people in the field, their worry, the thing that kept them up at night was that the truck could get stuck in the mud and not arrive. So they were solving a logistic problem, of course, in the scope of, people not getting sick, but to understand that the worry of the user, the client, is a different level. I even saw an ad for some kind of handyman that would come, to repair your appliance. And their ad was, we arrive on time. Mm-hmm. And what that says is, if I need a plumber, I'm not worried he's a bad plumber. I'm worried that I'm going to have to take the full day off and I'm not sure he'll arrive or they'll be late or stuff like that. So it's sort of like, your time is just as important as ours. And I respect you. And, I'm going to be there for you. And that creates this level of trust because you really feel like, oh, okay, he gets my worry.
Yeah.
And that changes how you interact with the company.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. What comes to, it's interesting. I like two sides of the spectrum, like cross my mind. It's like, I think about like the AI companies that have, that are launching, ChatGPT and Anthropic, and, they come out and just like, hey, we have this really cool tool. and everybody's just like, oh, this is so cool. And we're doing all the things, but there's not really a story, behind it. It just exists. And, we play with it. But then I started to see like these little ads that are starting to pop up, and it's just like, oh, wow, this is practical.
There's a lot of opportunity to put a wrapper around these AI, very specialized
absolutely.
in your program, your problem. And, I've been coaching AI startups, and like a year or two ago, it was, look how the crazy stuff we're doing.
Exactly.
And today it's, okay, the crazy opportunity of AI.
Mm-hmm.
But, what about security, about privacy, about hallucination, about, implementing, about, employee onboarding and all these problems. So we're doing this, the amazing, crazy stuff like everybody else, but we're doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting shift, especially for companies. If a company is going to buy AI today, so you're a hospital, what are you going to just send all your patient information up to ChatGPT? No, I mean this has to be managed. And if that report, you generate a report from a medical report, damn, if that report isn't 100% correct and they amputate the wrong leg, I mean that's really bad. So so there's governance that comes in and all these other things. We've just passed that kind of hype phase where you can say you can do amazing stuff. Yeah, but you have to do it right. So so it's interesting again to see what the worry is.
Right. The other side that I was thinking about was Nike, with their Just Do It, and it's like, you think about the story, as an athlete, it's just like, yeah, I'm going to get out there. I'm going to do the thing, practice and work hard. I'm going to win, et cetera, et cetera. And there's always a story around those three words, just do it. I just find that so fascinating.
But I think it's even more powerful than that, because yes, it might be a myth, but it's supposedly there are people that actually buy sneakers to run, but most people buy them to look cool.
Right.
No, but I mean, so they do have really two different audiences. They do have the athletes, and it's a sports brand, but they have the lifestyle. People have Nike. And so if a lot of other sports brands target the athlete, and it's a kind of a side thing that there's a little bit of lifestyle. Mm-hmm. But with Just Do It, go get the girl or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a way of saying we're there for people that have an aspiration, and yes, the athletes are part of that, but not only. And so other, wherever you're at, you can sort of say, I have to, I'm going to quit my job and start my startup or whatever, just do it. And so it's a way of, reconciling all their different audiences in one tagline, which is quite a feat.
Makes sense. I guess I looked at it from my worldview, but I get that. That makes total sense. That makes total sense. That's huge. So your big story, your big idea is that we're building customer centric stories. And you talked about the company earlier, and they had two different audiences, and you built stories around each of them. What do we do wrong? What is the typical story making process, story creation process that you were seeing? And then of course, your solution, and what are the problems with that? Let's start there.
Well, I guess the first thing is, people are caught in their bubble. And so if you say, what do you do? They're going to, well, I do this great stuff.
Right.
But as a customer, I found that we go through 3 steps when we encounter a brand. And the first one is sort of like, do I recognize myself in this brand? Is it for people like me or for companies like me? If I land on I'm an independent consultant. So I'm looking for a CRM, a customer relationship management system to think, okay, I'm going to finally step up my thing. And it says, we're the best for teams. Well, they've lost me. I'm not a team. Mm-hmm. But if they say, we specialize in independence, because we understand you, I'll think, gee, they understand. They see me. They like me. And so that first step is really a kind of shortcut into trust by saying, hey, we understand who you are. We understand your aspirations. We understand your challenges. And a lot of companies skip that. So then the second step would be perception, which is just understanding the offer. And often I find one of the problems is you tell everything about your offer. So, I know what a CRM is. Mm-hmm. So if you tell me that, we follow up on customers, you think, what I want to know is why should I choose you over your competition?
Yeah.
So what you're doing different is often more important than what you're doing in general. We do all the normal stuff, but we do it differently, or we do this in addition, or whatever it is. There can be ideas around categories and things. Anyway, so somehow companies know how to talk about what they do, even though you can probably do better. But then there's a third step, which I call projection. So I say, okay, that's CRM. That's the thing I have to do. But then I'm going to have to install it, and I'm going to have to learn to use it, and I'm going to have to get all my data from my emails and spreadsheet. Okay, I'm going to do it, but I'll come back next week, and then I don't. And so if you can accompany people to say, this is how it's going to happen. These are the steps. And hey, by the way, you won't have these problems anymore. And then close your eyes and imagine your day. Imagine how you're this positive future.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow it closes all these open questions, all these objections. And if you do recognition well, you have the right people coming in instead of random people coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And then you bring them a few steps further along in the engagement. They're already pre-living what you're selling. And so that book a demo or, sign up for our trial or whatever that your call to action is, you've closed down a number of objections, and they can see it and they can imagine it. Often they'll say, oh, that looks cool, but I have no idea what's going to happen. Is this consulting? Is it an online thing? Is it a training? Is it a way? But if you can really say, okay, this is going to be 4 weeks and you're going to spend 20 minutes a day and it's this, and then that, makes it so easier for people. So recognition, perception, projection, and often companies skip on the first one and the last one. I mean, they only talk about what they do.
Yeah.
And this is a way of saying, we get you. This is how you're going to be impacted. This is how we can help you. We're the best at making you successful. It's not that we're the best, we're the hero. Right. It's you're the hero, and we're gonna be your guide to help you be successful. And look how it'll be great. And so, if you can build a story that follows those steps, that is very engaging.
Yeah, interesting. I'm thinking. I'm stuck on the not stuck, but I'm thinking about the CRM in particular, just the amount of competition out there. And one of the, and I mean, you've done marketing. One of the things that we've always shied away from in marketing is, talking about the features and benefits, and so we're not talking, but, just getting wrapped up in the features and benefits. And I'm wondering, when we're talking about, highly competitive areas, how we craft that part of the story without, just coming down with a list. Hey, we do this, like every other firm, but whatever. How does that work? How do we put that together? How do we figure that out?
So I found that some people will come in and say, hey, we do all these things for all these people. There's no way where we can come with one story.
Yeah.
And that's the Nike example where, you come down and you get this one story, but you have to choose. What is the core identity? What are their one or two challenges? But you have all this backlog of, well, we solve all these other problems too, and look at all these other benefits.
Right.
But at the end of the story, you can sort of raise the stakes. If you don't go forward with the CRM, you're going to still, miss follow-ups. You're going to have all these issues.
Yeah.
But if you work with us, imagine what it's going to be like. You're going to, have the time to spend with your thing. You're going to increase your this. You're going to be more successful. You can, and a lot of it is about emotion. There's a direct benefit. Then there's the emotional benefit of the benefit. So I mow your lawn.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine how you'll be proud in front of your neighbors. So it's not necessarily about your grass is going to be an inch long. It's about how will you feel with this? We often stop at the benefit, the practical benefit, and then don't go all the way to the emotional benefit. You're going to be the hero of your company.
Yeah.
You're going to, or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So it almost sounds like it almost sounds like we're in a situation where who tells a better story. I mean, if you think about, your lawn care company, it's like my lawn care company says, look at your lawn is going to be beautiful.
your lawn is going to look better than your neighbor's yard. You know what I'm saying? We're going to come out like every 2 weeks. We're going to make sure your grass is, and so, I get that, that feeling of pride, I get the confidence that they're going to be out there every week, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, another company can come along and say the same thing. And so
that's where the differentiation is important.
What's that?
That's where the differentiation is so important. It's like,
and how do we get that into the story though? I mean, you just talked about cutting grass.
Well, first of all, you have to have one.
Okay.
So now I've seen landscapers or whatever, or gardeners who will say, we have a subscription model or something, and then we come when we need it, we organize the thing, or someone, or we have, what we do is that we choose the plants that will fill your yard with butterflies. And I knew someone like that would sell flower seeds, depending on the region, that would attract butterflies.
Amazing.
And so this idea of doing something different. So say you're an accountant and you think, how in the hell can I be different as an accountant?
Mm-hmm.
Well, say you
That's a good question. Drum roll, please.
I think companies are afraid to niche down. They're always afraid to say, if we niche down, we might lose that one customer,
Yeah.
But actually, if you niche down, so say you're an accountant, you say, okay, I'm an accountant for medical professionals. And so sure, the plumber won't come to you. But if I'm a doctor and I need an accountant, I think, oh, wow, okay, he knows my business. He knows how I work. Damn, I'm not going to choose a random one. I'm going to choose the one that specializes in this. And so instead of having, people flipping a coin to pick an accountant, yes, it's a niche. So you narrow it, but you are number one choice for that niche. And so it's probably one of the most common advice I give to companies is dare to niche down, dare to specialize, dare to stand out. If I was going to open a pizza parlor, I would do, I'm in Switzerland, so I would do, Chicago pizza, because then the choice is, should I do one of the normal pizzas or should I do Chicago pizza? And it so it's not for everybody, but you stand out. And if you stand out enough, so let's look at energy drinks. Give me 3 brands of energy drinks.
You got a Monster, you got the Red Bull, and I don't know.
So I think
Ultra.
I think you're the first one ever to not put Red Bull first. So usually it's Red Bull, pause, Monster, pause. I can't find a third one.
Yes, I don't drink energy drinks. I mean, that's my.
I don't either, but I think there are 192 brands of energy drinks. Red Bull.
Then bring more tomorrow.
But Red Bull has a 50% market share. They own the category. They don't advertise their product anymore. They advertise crazy stuff.
Yeah.
If you say, oh, let's talk about vacation rentals. Well, it's Airbnb, and then there's probably some others. But they weren't first there. Uber has become a verb. I mean, if you can actually, in the energy drink space, what was interesting, there was a thing called the 5-hour energy. There's some brand that was basically an energy shot instead of the energy drink. And Red Bull said, ooh, let's try to do that. And they couldn't do it because that had become a different category and that other company owned that category.
Right.
And so if you can create something that is different and special, that has is your own category, that's a very powerful position. And that's worth, niching down, risk. You'd rather have a few people that really are crazy about you than a whole crowd of people that don't really care.
Yes,
then they'll pick you because you're cheaper or something, and then they'll switch to someone else. But if you're doing something special, I land on a company that says, we specialize in services for independent consultants with white beards with a cat that live in Switzerland. I think, ooh, wow, that's for me. And I don't even know what they're selling.
Yeah, right. I was thinking, and I'm wondering, do you guide people in that? Because you talk about 2 things. You talk about, niching down, which is one thing. And it's a bold move, as you pointed out, but you also talked about the need for differentiation. And niching down can be a differentiation strategy, but encouraging butterflies, to visit your house every spring, that's a different level of differentiation. That is intentional.
Yeah. So
is that typically part of the strategy, or do you go to, or let me allow you to answer that.
No. So the thing is, so what I did is I came up with some canvases. So you have a canvas, you put Post-its and you answer questions about your customer first, try to forget about your company and get to know your customer. And I find that companies know their customers a lot better than they think. And then there's a framework where you put these elements into a sequence for the story. And so often companies, there is an interesting story there. They just don't know how to tell it. And they don't necessarily have to change what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But often if the story doesn't hold up, it's a sort of the symptom of something else that doesn't quite hold up. If you can't create that interesting story, I mean, then either you're not talking to the right people or you're not creating the right output or something. And then, we can come up with a different view. So, some companies will come and say, damn, that's what's important for them. And you tweak their offer just a little bit and it becomes something different. And you don't necessarily have to be revolutionary and have a crazy thing that no one's ever seen. It's really just it can be a posture. It can be a promise. When you say, hey, we arrive on time, that's not, you don't need tech or things. You just need a commitment and a promise. And that's already different.
Yeah, absolutely. What I love about that approach is, there are so many electricians and lawn care professionals and that sort of thing. And, what your approach does is it takes them out of the commodity space. You know what I'm saying? And so when they're going back and they're looking at pricing, they're not necessarily pricing directly, to their competition. They're pricing based on their own space. Especially when they're recognizing that space. I absolutely love that approch. We did that.
I think that's very dangerous. If you're a commodity, people will choose you over price, and then it will be a fight, a price war. And all it does is that, everyone loses out and, it's a race to the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's these stories, like there was in this chic Swiss Alp ski resort, the guy had these cashmere sweaters and, he had extra inventory and didn't know what to do. So, he multiplied the price by 10, put a sign saying the most expensive sweaters in the world, and he sold them out. And so, why do people buy things is complicated. And if you can I did my MBA in Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, and I got there for a 3-week session, and I went to the ATM to get some dollars, and I put the wrong code twice and it blocked my card, and I was there for 3 weeks. And I said, damn. Yeah. I walked away from the ATM. I probably did 5 steps. My phone rang and said, you're in Pittsburgh. Your card got blocked. This is, Visa Zurich. How can we?
I was the person.
Yeah. And I thought, wow. And they sold my card. So what it was fraud control to say, this guy in Geneva, his card was blocked in Pittsburgh. What's going on? But instead of saying, this is the card police, are you really, John Elbing? It's, hey, how can we help?
Right.
And I sort of always remember that. That was, 20 years ago, but it felt like someone got it right. Marketing is everything you do. It's how you answer the phone, how you open the door, what your shop smells like, it's all that. It's not your logo. It's not your colors. It's
the experience.
It's how you interact with the world.
Yeah. That experience, how the world experiences you. I love that. One of the and you've worked with startups, so I think this question should be applicable. One of the things I've noticed, with starting companies is that the customer the customer that we envision that we're building our product for isn't always the customer that ends up being our primary customer. And so in creating the story with a startup, how does that process go, since you don't necessarily know who that end user is going to be?
So it's not it's more art than science, in the sense that you're sort of working on your best guess. And it doesn't mean you can only have one story. At the beginning with a startup, it's not necessarily that they're buying, a Super Bowl ad. It's more like they're going to contact different types of companies or different types of individuals, or, association, trade associations or groups or resellers, and all these different methods. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Often I find that the value proposition piles up. You can have the end user will benefit from the person that decides using the service that was delivered by an intermediary. It was built by the thing that was, and so if you want to convince, the investor, you're not going to say this is going to bring you a lot of money. It's, we have people that are, we're really delivering something that they're going to pay for. And I can feel that. So often you can make a story that this recognition part is often identity, aspiration, and challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you can make the identity a little bit vague, and it's more about the aspiration. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of people fit into that aspiration, sort of like the Nike thing, where you sort of say, we work with people that want to solve this problem. And then suddenly it's the grandmothers that, that react and not the young kids.
Yeah.
But then again, you have to try. And then if it doesn't work, you can try again. Startups, I think the most frustrating I've had is things where the audience is obvious, the need is obvious, they're screaming to have it, and somehow it doesn't work. And you think, damn, I have this one startup that helps you write your will.
Uh-huh.
In Switzerland, at least, if you want to write a will, it's there's crazy laws, protections, and things, and you have to go to see a notary. It costs you probably $3,000 to write this will, and 2 years later, it's going to be obsolete because something happened, and it's a crazy thing and all that. So they created this platform for like $300. You can not only write your will, it goes through all the steps online, and then you pay $50 a year to, at any time you can update it, because you divorced or whatever it is, kind of thing. And they used it, they looked and they said 87% of people think that, having a will is really, really important. Only 20% actually do it. It's because it's too complicated and too expensive, and nobody does it. Mm-hmm. And it could be something like, well, writing a will is scary. And so, yes, if you ask people why they don't write their will, they'll say it's complicated and expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But it might be just that they don't want to face the idea that they'll die someday.
Mm.
And so you can have it's the right story, but then there's something missing, and that's something that has to be worked through to figure out how do you, they can bring people in with the right story,
mm-hmm.
but then to get them to go all the way through it is, and sometimes frustrating.
Yeah. That's painful. That's painful. I've seen that. It's. I was going to ask you earlier. It's like you have a technology, and you understand the technology, you understand the benefit to people, et cetera, but people don't really understand that they need the technology, and it's just like, it's right here. Just eat.
Sometimes there are problems out there that people don't see as problems. Mm-hmm. They see them as, well, life sucks sometimes. So they go 10 times around the block to look for a parking space. That's just life. So if you come with a solution to say, hey, we have a way to find the parking space, no one's going on Google to say, how can I find parking spaces faster? Because it doesn't seem like a solvable problem.
Right.
So you bring in these new solutions, you have to sort of educate them, that, hey, this is something we can actually work on. And that's quite a process.
I gotta tell you, that's funny you say that, because like for the first time, like ever, I went to a city I don't normally go to, and I was meeting someone for lunch, and like on the app, I use Waze, it actually had like, where parking was. And for the first time I used this thing. I was so happy with it. It was like, I got to do this again, And the funny thing is, the person that I met, she ended up parking like a block and a half away. She paid like $20 for the day for parking. I was just like, oh, you're going to park like right next to the restaurant.
See? Someone
Yes. We don't know that we need it. We don't know things are available. That's amazing. And do we have time to walk through, perhaps at a high level, what this process would look like? So I'm a 10-year-old company. I've been doing what I do. I have a decent, customer base and that sort of thing. But, like you talked about the gardening company, it's like, we don't really have that story, especially when we look at, passing the idea of who we are to that next generation, or enhancing our market position, or, getting in deeper with our current customer base. What does that process look like for working with you?
So the first step is you sort of have to realize that. And when things, you keep going, you don't necessarily think, oh, we need to work on the story. So again, I'm in that position of saying, oh, working on your story, and all the companies in the world will benefit from this, but no one, they don't necessarily know that that's an issue. So I find that there are situations where it's a little bit more obvious. There's a product coming out. There was a merger. There's an MBO, market the management buyout. There's something happening where they have to say, okay, now we're going to reposition. But I found that it also works with companies that are just ongoing, but they can step back. So how it works. So what I'm coming out with now is this analysis of your online presence to say, what is the story you tell today? To make it a little bit obvious, to say, well, is that the best story you can tell? Is that really the story you want to tell?
Yeah.
And if it sort of is, then we can work on making it better, improving your website and things like that.
Yeah.
With adding recognition and adding a projection, but somehow the core story is there. But otherwise, then there's this process. And so we go through these canvases where hopefully we can get the customer facing team. In some of companies that are a little bit bigger, there's marketing and sales, and they're at odds with each other. If the client doesn't sign, the salespeople will say, you don't give us good leads. And the marketing team say, oh, hey, you can't even transform our great leads, kind of thing. So if you can get them together and they build the story together, that's the story, the marketing will say, and it's the same story that then that when the sales takes over, and people, feel that coherence. If they go on the website and then the salesperson says something different, and, then they're confused. And then, they're on the LinkedIn posts, say something different and all that. So I work on this sort of narrative coherence of the story. And so then we go through, one company, we spent 18 hours, 9 times 2 hours, 8 people online in different countries, going through, and then they would go back and test an idea of a story with existing customers, and then come back and say this, and then come up with a thing, and then say, that's a great story, but it looks like what our competitors say too.
Right.
How can we make the story, more unique? And then we go through until they really have a core story that says, okay, now we can build on that.
Right.
And then they still have to go back and, update their website and update their pitch deck and their sales stuff and all that. So there's really, I don't feel that I've invented something crazy new, but it's the systematic. It's we go through saying, okay, we ask the questions, we go through the things, we, elaborate. So what is their aspiration? Is it just very practical, or is it something more aspirational? Or what are the problems? Which one is more important? What is the vocabulary they use? And how does this match what you're offering? And we go through all this, and we come up with a story, and then they tell the story and feel how they feel, and then and that story that comes out of that process, creates, team alignment and has this foundation that then they can create marketing can create campaigns. They can talk to their customers. That's a kind of a powerful process.
Yeah. Wow, that is. If someone wants to, I guess, learn more about that, I mean, what's a great resource?
So my company's name is Standpoint because it's so important to take the other person's standpoint. My website is standpoint.ch. I'm in Switzerland, but I work with, companies around the world. If you go onto the website, first of all, you can get a free 30-minute consultation, talk about your brand, talk about your thing. You get some insights around your story. I have some tools. One is a tool that can help you build a tagline. And actually, by building your tagline, you go through what's important, different formats, different things. And, it comes up and it already shows a little bit of a hint of, a tagline isn't just, yeah, we're the best. It can really, when it's well done, it can really be just the teaser for what you offer. And I have a few things coming up like that. But to start with, just go down to the bottom of any page and just get 30 minutes with me and see what we can do. So
we have a tagline generator. We've got some other tools at standpoint.ch. Is that right?
Exactly.
Fantastic. So I've got one more question for you. Okay. So the name of the show is The Relentless Pursuit of Winning. Winning is something that, we can all define for ourselves. The challenge that we have sometimes is maintaining that relentless pursuit. How would you advise our audience on how to maintain that relentless pursuit?
One of my issues personally is the relentless part. I'll write a book and things, and then I'll go on to the next project and then build this and things. And I'm not really good at actually doing that. I'll do videos on LinkedIn, and then I've done like a dozen of them, and then suddenly I realize it's been 6 months and I haven't anymore. But for me, it's about somehow understanding enough about what you're doing to build something that's coherent with who you are and what you want to accomplish. I used to have a well-paying banking job kind of thing, and now I earn a third of that, but I'm 10 times more happy. And I'm involved, and there's this idea that you can you understand who you're helping, how you can help, and how you can get value out of that. And it's sort of learn to love the process, the job itself. Sometimes you sort of feel like you get the result, way at the end, and okay, you're willing to suffer the whole route, to get that thing at the end. But there's no real end, and so it's all about the route, and it's all about the journey. And so to be building the right journey, I think makes then that relentlessness much easier, because the journey itself is part of the winning.
Building the journey. Yes.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. I love that idea. I hear, I guess, it's kind of a conversation, sometimes the journey is more interesting, than the destination. And, just being willing to go with the journey, how it goes is one of the things that I'm starting to enjoy, where I've spent like 30 years, trying to force everything. It's just like, there's so much more out there, if I just take the time to step back and be curious, every day, it's just like, hey, it's one more day. What are we going to do today?
Yeah. And, curiosity is I'm surprised it didn't come up earlier, because empathy, curiosity, this connection, and, couldn't agree more.
Absolutely. John, is there anything else you want to share with our audience before we call it a day?
They say, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So, sometimes I feel that everything looks like a story, but also feel that this idea, if you go back and go to your website, try to have a quick lobotomy and forget what you do, go onto the website and say, who's this for? And if you're not sure, or ask your mother, and if, she's not sure, that can be a sort of easy first step for that first recognition of who's your ideal client, and how can you talk about them so they feel, that's for me. And that's a first, not easy, but it's a first step that can be pretty powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important. It's funny. I talk to people about building their website. It's like, if people can't recognize themselves in your website, immediately they're going to go someplace else. So that's absolute gold. John, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. I love storytelling, and I love the way that you present it. This was fantastic.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I hope our listeners got as much out of it as I did.
Awesome. And folks, we do hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. We'll catch you next time.